Access control lists and user permissions can be used in both Linux and Mac for application control and execution prevention, and some general application strategies that you can choose to adopt are these. First is limit the processes that run as root. For example, you should never run a service like Apache or SSH as root or with root permissions. That's just asking for trouble, because when that or if that service gets compromised, then it has maximum permissions. It's the sort of thing that people used to do back in the day, actually not that long ago, and then when they got compromised, whoever compromised it had full control of the box. You want to limit the users that can start processes directly or indirectly. You want to limit process and user access to directories or folders and files on a need to have access basis. Try to limit file descriptors, memory, and other system resources that can be quickly exhausted as well. So we've used sudo a number of times in the course. I've already mentioned it in this section. Sudo is a configurable command line tool similar to su, but it allows certain users to run programs with root privileges without spawning a root shell. For example, sudo and then a command, ping, for example. It can also do a lot more than that, and it can be used to lock down what users can do and also enable users to do things without having to give them the permissions of the root user or the password of the root user for all things. You can be more granular. Now, it could be that you might not even have sudo installed, so you may need to install it with that command there. If you just type sudo, you can tell whether or not you've got it installed. There is a sudo as file that you edit in order to configure sudo. Now, you can edit that via a regular text editor, but it's absolutely not recommended, because if you make a mistake or the file gets corrupted, then you could lock yourself out completely out of the system. So for that reason, there is a special way of editing the file, which is sudo by sudo. And then that takes you into, in this case, this is nano, and you can edit this file. And this is what it looks like. And what you can see here, we've got the privileged user root. We can see we've got this all equals all ... all. What this shows is the rule that this applies to is root, and this first all indicates that this rule applies to all hosts, and then this all here indicates that the root user can run commands as all users. This all here indicates that the root user can run commands as all groups, and this all here indicates that these rules apply to all commands. So obviously, if you change these, it changes commands, groups, users, hosts, and the username. And you can see here, we actually don't have a username. What we've got here is a group. So this means that anybody in the group sudo has these permissions. And that's often how it works in Linux, that you get assigned to the sudo group, and then you're able to use a sudo command. You'll find in Mac and BSD that this may not be sudo, it could be wheel instead, the group wheel. So let's exit out of here. So if we have a look at the group file, we can see all of the groups in here, and we saw that there was a sudo group. So there we go. We can see the two members. We've got Nathan, we've got me, and we've got Bob. So Nathan and Bob, we can use sudo. And when we use sudo, we have full permissions over everything with the all. So let's exit out of here. Let's add a user. So to add a user, we can use user add, or we can use add user. Add user does more automatically for us. So we'll use the add user. You may or may not have it installed, then just install it. So sudo add user, and then Blippi is our username. And we can see it's done a few things there. It's added them to a group, created a home directory, etc. Let's give them a password. And then it's going to ask a bunch of questions here that we could fill in if we were doing this for real. So now we've got a Blippi user. So we want Blippi to be able to sudo. So in order to do that, we can sudo sudo usermod -a capital G sudo blippy. And there we go. So let's check out the groups file. Scroll down here. And there we go. We can see blippy is in there. So blippy will be able to use sudo, obviously. Exit out of there. Go back to sudo vi sudo. And this file here, you want to check out the man page so you can find the syntax. And essentially you can lock down what users you want to have access to what commands. And you can be quite granular with this if you want to use this as a tool for locking down the system. File permissions now. So ls-la. The A, by the way, is an option to show hidden or all files, and the L is an option to show a long listing. So if we click here, we can see the file permissions for the various files and folders. So here we can see 5 files. They're actually VPN related files. If we look at the permissions here, we can see we've got read and write for the owner, we've got read for the group, and we've got read for everyone else. So let's imagine we want to change those permissions. So we want to change it so it's read write for the owner. So that would be a 6. And then we want no access to the group and no access to anybody else. So that would be 600. And then we need the name of the file. ca.crt is the one we're going to choose here. There we go. It's -la. And we can see the permissions have changed. So if we bring in this table here, you can see what numbers correspond to what permission. The first number we put in is the owner, the second number is the group, the third number is everyone. 4 is read permission, 6 is read write, 7 is read write execute, 0 is no permissions. You might want to change who owns the file. So that would be done with chown, then the user that you're changing it to, and then the name of the file. There we go, ls-la. We can see that that has changed to nobody. That's just a very quick intro to the permissions and how to change them and the access control list. So the obvious question is, what do we want to change it to? Well, we have a whole section on hardening the operating system. And when you get to that section, we talk about standards and guidelines that have been put together by industry experts. And those things are better to use than to come up with your own methods, or at least they're better to use as a basis. So when we get to the section on hardening, the standards have permissions in there, file permissions, and you want to check those out for what you want to lock down.